In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about grid drawing. This is step 1 to 2 videos, and it's going to show you kind of where grid drawing started and the purpose of it. So I'm going to start off here with this image. It's a very simplified image of a tiger, and something like this may be something that you have seen in a coloring book. So I noticed the other day when I was coloring with my son that they actually had one of these in the coloring book. So this is something that you may have done before, and it is as simple enough to be in a coloring book. So, but it can get complicated, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the purpose of grid drawing is you take an image and you put this grid over top of it, which simplifies the image. So instead of having to draw this entire tiger, you would draw, this box, which would be a line from corner to corner, basically. This box, which is just lines inside of a square, and so it breaks it down into smaller pieces, making it easier for you to see. So I said that I was going to show you a more complicated grid drawing because you can use grid drawing for photographs or outline image like this. Any image basically that you would want to draw, you can use grid drawing as a method of making that process easier. So I'm going to pull over here to Chuck Close. This is a very famous grid painter. So he does painting and some prints, but what I'm going to show you is some of his paintings. And you can see him here. This is Chuck Close in his art studio, and he has his original photograph, a photograph that he took himself, and he draws a grid just like I'm going to show you. He uses those grids to enlarge that image, and then I'll talk more about what these little circles are here in a minute, but he uses that grid to transfer that image onto a very large scale painting. Pull this up. This is some of his earlier works. So he used to focus on doing very realistic, making the image look as realistic as possible, and he did a very, very good job of it. This is not a photograph. This is his painting of a photograph that he used grid drawing to help him do. This is what he started working on in his later days, which he still focused on making it look real. You can tell this is him. This is his self-portrait, meaning a painting of himself. But if you zoom in, you can see all these little circles that make up the image in its entirety. So instead of just using brown here, he would use multiple colors, green and red, that would, when placed beside each other, look like that. So that's what he actually became famous for, is these paintings that are real, but when you zoom in on them, look abstract or don't look like anything more than just squares. Again, you can even see his grid there that he used. So this is him again working. And you'll always, even if you just Google Chuck Close in his studio, you'll see an image that he's drawing from that he's gridded out. So all of his artworks, he uses a grid to draw. Okay, so now we're going to go and I'm going to show you how to create a grid on yours. So it's not going to be a coloring book. You're not going to have the grid already laid out there for you. So I'm going to show you how to do that on your own. Move this over so we can see. Alright. So to start, you want to find your image, obviously, that you're going to use, whether or not that's a photograph or a printed image. I'm just going to use this because it's simple. Alright, and if you have a smaller image like I do, you would want to use a smaller scale grid. So I'm going to do a 1/2 inch grid on here. Chuck Close, and those images that he was using, he was probably using an 1 inch or 2 inch grid. I'm going to make a mark at every 1/2 inch across the top. The smaller your grid is, it actually makes it simpler to use. Now here's a place that people often mess up. You do not want to flip your ruler. You want to move it straight down so that you're starting on the same side. You want to be really specific where you put these dots because you don't want to be off. You don't want your grid to be catty-cornered. And then you are going to, I'm actually just going to start here, because the grid only needs to cover the image that you're trying to draw. Somewhere people often mess up too is they'll be like here, and they won't really line it up with that dot, so you really want to make sure your ruler is touching both dots before you create your line, because you don't want them to get off. Now, some of you don't like technical stuff like this. You'd rather just free draw or draw from observation, but remember, this is a way to simplify the drawing process, not make it more complicated. It may seem complicated right now using a ruler, but later on you'll see how this is going to make it easier on you. Alright, so I have my vertical lines going straight across the image. Now I'm going to do the same thing for my horizontal lines. Now I'm going pretty fast just because I've done this a lot, but again, you can pause this video. Be precise. Make sure you're putting your dots at the half-inch mark. Then you're going to line up your lines. Somewhere else people mess up is they'll have not the same dots, like you'll line up dot 1 with dot 2 and your lines will start getting crooked, so just make sure you're using the right dots before you start. Alright, so if you get these lines off, it's going to make it more difficult for you and you're going to have to start over. So if they look off like this one does, like that doesn't look like it's necessarily, this side looks smaller than that, I'm just going to go back over here and check, make sure I didn't get that dot off place, and I did. Alright, there is my grid. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to show you a finished model of this. So all I did here was just cut out the extra, any part of the grid that wasn't necessarily touching the image. So I've cut around, and that's going to simplify it for you. Then what you want to do is label the top with your ABCs across, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So here we go. This is going to be, if I did that here, my first block that has actual image in it is this one, so that's going to be my A, B, C, D, E, all the way across, and then my first block that has image in it is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down. It will look like this. Darken it a little bit for you so you can see those lines. Okay, now what we need to do is create this grid onto a larger piece of paper. So again, like I said, what Chuck Close did is he takes a smaller image and he enlarges it. Very large scale. So you could do a half-inch grid over here, but your image would be the same size, which is fine if that's what your intent is. If you want to double this, you would do a 1-inch grid. This is half-inch, so you would do a 1-inch over here. My paper isn't large enough for that, because then I would have to have, since I have 10 blocks here, I'm sorry, I don't know why the color is doing like this. Since I have 10 blocks here, I would need a 10 by 10 inch piece of paper. Since I don't have that, I am going to do a 3/4 of an inch. So all I did here is I made a little dot on my ruler where 3/4 of an inch is, and I'm going to make a dot. Oh, I'm sorry, you need to use a pencil for this. I got messed up. Use a pencil. I'm going to make a dot at 3/4 of an inch, moving my ruler down. And you are just repeating the same steps that we just did. You would go all the way down, move your ruler over, don't flip it, move it straight over, Then continue your lines down. Once you finish that all the way down, you would connect your lines. Now I'm skipping some steps. I didn't go all the way down. I don't want this to be a 20-minute video. And you would just draw your lines across like that. Then the next step, just like on the other video, you would do your lines across the top, all the way across, and then across the bottom. Once you did that, you would connect them. And when you finish, your grid will look like this. And now I've already actually did this video once already and it deleted, and that's why you'll see parts of our second video where I've actually started transferring the image. So in our next video, it's going to show you how to take this image and blow it up onto this, and you'll see here it'll be quite a bit larger, not quite double, but quite a bit larger. All right.